The emergency psalm for urgent financial help that you can only listen in December. If you're hearing this in December, don't brush it off as another video in your feed. December carries a strange pressure that most people don't say out loud. Bills stack up, deadlines tighten, family expectations get louder, and the calendar feels like a closing door. And right when you need calm, life demands receipts. That's why I'm going to say something that may sound bold, but I mean it with reverence. There's a psalm you don't treat like background noise. You don't play it while scrolling. You don't put it on like a playlist. You listen with intention because it's designed for moments when your heart is tired, your mind is racing, and your finances feel like they're being squeezed. This is not a get-rich-quick fantasy, and I'm not here to sell you a miracle on a timer. I am here to guide you into a spiritual emergency posture. Clarity over panic, faith over shame, wisdom over impulsive decisions, and favor over closed doors. Not because money is a god, but because money touches your rent, your food, your family, your peace, your choices. And when financial pressure attacks your peace, it becomes spiritual, it becomes mental, it becomes emotional. That's when you stop treating prayer like a last resort and start using it like a foundation. What I'm about to lead you into is an emergency psalm for urgent financial help. Not urgent in the sense of desperation that makes you reckless, but urgent in the sense of alignment that makes you steady. The kind of alignment that helps you see the opportunity you were too anxious to notice. The kind that strengthens your hands to do what's wise, not what's loud. The kind that quiets the inner voice that keeps repeating, "It's too late." December tries to convince people that their story is already written. But December is not your judge. It's a doorway, and you can walk through it with a different spirit. There are people listening right now who are not asking for luxury. You're asking for breathing room. You're asking for stability. You're asking for a way to handle what's in front of you without falling apart. You might be staring at a balance that makes your stomach drop. You might be trying to stretch what you have so it reaches the end of the month. You might be carrying the quiet fear of not having enough, and you're smiling in public while doing math in your head in private. I understand that pressure, and I'm telling you, you don't have to carry it alone, and you don't have to carry it in silence. This December message is for the person who is tired of living in financial survival mode, the person who wants to break the pattern of fear-driven choices, the person who is ready to stop calling themselves bad with money and start building a new identity, disciplined, guided, patient, and protected, the person who wants abundance with integrity and prosperity with peace, the person who knows deep down that they were not created to be trapped by scarcity thinking, even if their circumstances have been tight for a long time. And listen carefully. The emergency psalm isn't a magic spell that drops cash from the ceiling. It's something better than superstition. It is a spiritual recalibration that brings you back to truth when panic tries to take the wheel. It is a way to bring your mind under control when worry tries to run your day. It is a way to reset your internal language about money so you can stop cursing your future with what you keep repeating in fear. Because sometimes a closed door is not a door at all. Sometimes it's a belief. Sometimes it's guilt. Sometimes it's a shame that makes you avoid looking at your own situation clearly. Sometimes it's a habit of expecting the worst so you won't be disappointed. Those are real blocks. And in December, they get louder. So today we are going to do something different. We're going to approach your financial life with spiritual seriousness and practical maturity. We're going to ask God for what you actually need: guidance, favor, strength, discipline, discernment, courage, and a clean heart. We're going to ask for open doors and the ability to recognize them. We're going to ask for ideas that are sound, not impulsive. We're going to ask for provision, yes, but also for wisdom to manage what you receive, because abundance without wisdom becomes another form of stress. Before we go one step further, I want you to do a simple act that marks this moment as intentional, not because a comment activates God like a switch, but because your mind needs a line in the sand, a decision, a turning point. Type one word in the comments right now: align. If you're willing to step out of panic and into alignment, write a line. And if you feel comfortable, add your first name. Not for performance, not for show, but as a quiet way of saying, I'm here, I'm listening, I'm ready to rebuild. Because this is what happens when you make a real decision. Your attention sharpens, Your heart softens, your perspective lifts, and you stop treating your finances like a curse and start treating your life like a responsibility you can grow into. You might not control every outcome today, but you can control your posture. You can control your obedience. You can control whether you choose fear or faith as your default language. And that changes more than people think. Now, let me set the atmosphere the right way. This emergency psalm is not meant to make you arrogant. It's meant to make you steady. It's meant to restore dignity to the person who's been silently blaming themselves. It's meant to bring peace to the person who can't sleep because the numbers keep replaying in their mind. It's meant to help you breathe again so you can think again. Because when fear is loud, you miss good options. When shame is heavy, you isolate. When anxiety is constant, you make decisions you regret. But when peace returns, your judgment improves. When hope returns, your energy returns. When faith returns, you move with purpose. December is a month where people try to fix everything at once. But we're going to start with one thing, your spiritual center. From that center, we will speak with clarity over your financial life. We will refuse hopelessness. We will refuse the voice that says you're behind forever. We will refuse the urge to compare your life to someone else's highlight reel. And we will choose a cleaner focus. Daily provision, steady progress, wise steps, open doors, and a heart that trusts God while you do your part. Stay with me closely, because in a moment I'm going to explain why this is not just a regular prayer moment. There is a difference between talking to God from panic and speaking with God-given authority from alignment. And once you understand that difference, you'll stop collapsing under financial pressure and start standing up inside your own life. There's a reason spiritual authority matters when money is under pressure, and it's not superstition or emotion. Authority is about alignment with truth. Throughout Scripture, moments of provision never begin with panic. They begin with positioning. When people understood who God was and who they were in relation to Him, provision followed as a consequence, not a chase. That pattern hasn't expired. It wasn't limited to ancient times, desert journeys, or symbolic stories meant only to inspire. These principles were preserved because they work on the human heart, the human mind, and human behavior in every generation. The Bible never treats money as something separate from spiritual life. It treats it as something that reveals a condition of the heart. Fear distorts judgment. Guilt weakens confidence. Shame makes people hide instead of seek wisdom. That's why Scripture repeatedly addresses provision, stewardship, inheritance, and daily bread, not to create obsession with wealth, but to prevent fear from ruling people's decisions. When fear rules, people either freeze or act recklessly. Neither produces stability. Authority restores balance. From the beginning, provision followed order. When people walked in alignment, resources appeared at the right time, in the right way, through the right channels. Sometimes it came through unexpected sources. Sometimes it came through instruction. Sometimes it came through restraint. But it always came with purpose. Financial help in Scripture was never about excess for ego. It was about sufficiency for calling, peace for the household, and dignity for the individual. That matters because many people today are not chasing luxury. They're chasing relief. They want to breathe without anxiety. They want to plan without fear. They want to sleep without running numbers in their head. Authority in the biblical sense is not domination. It's permission. It's the permission to stand on truth instead of being dragged by circumstances. When Scripture says that God provides daily bread, it doesn't mean irresponsibility. It means trust paired with obedience. When Scripture speaks about inheritance, it doesn't mean entitlement without effort. It means identity before action. You don't work to become a child. You work because you are one. That distinction changes everything about how a person approaches money, opportunity, and pressure. Look closely at how provision shows up in biblical narratives. It often follows a moment of clarity. Someone listens. Someone obeys. Someone adjusts their posture. Someone stops reacting and starts responding. That's authority at work. Authority doesn't shout. It steadies. It doesn't rush. It discerns. It doesn't deny reality. It refuses to be controlled by fear. That's why spiritual authority is relevant to financial pressure. It stabilizes the inner world. so the outer world can be handled wisely. There's also a pattern of timing that Scripture honors. Provision often comes daily, not all at once. Enough for the moment, enough for the step in front of you. That's uncomfortable for people who want guarantees, but it's powerful for people who want growth. Daily provision forces trust. It forces awareness. It forces responsibility. It keeps the heart from attaching itself to excess while still meeting real needs. December tests this more than most months because it compresses pressure, end-of-year deadlines, social expectations, financial comparisons, emotional weight. That's why authority matters now. Without it, December turns into emotional spending, avoidance, or despair. With it, December becomes a place of recalibration. The Psalms themselves are evidence of this authority. They are not sanitized poetry written from comfort. Many of them were written under stress, threat, uncertainty, and lack. They contain fear, honesty, frustration, and hope in the same breath. But notice what they always return to: remembrance, perspective, truth. The psalmist doesn't deny the problem. He recenters the soul. That act alone restores authority. When the soul remembers who God is, panic loses its grip. When panic loses its grip, decisions improve. When decisions improve, outcomes change. This is why the emergency psalm matters. Not because it bypasses effort, but because it restores orientation. It brings you back to center when financial stress tries to scatter your focus. It reminds you that provision is not just about numbers, but about wisdom, timing, restraint, courage, and obedience. It reminds you that you are not cursed, forgotten, or permanently behind. It reminds you that your current situation is a chapter, not a verdict. Spiritual authority also corrects the way people talk about money. Words shape attention. Attention shapes behavior. Behavior shapes results. Scripture repeatedly warns about careless speech, not because words are magic, but because they train the mind. When you constantly speak lack, you train your attention to scan for danger. When you speak truth, you train your attention to scan for opportunity. That's not denial, that's discipline. Authority disciplines the inner narrative, so the outer life can move forward with clarity. Another important piece of authority is responsibility. Scripture never separates blessing from stewardship. Provision is often tied to trustworthiness, not perfection. People who were entrusted with more were people who handled what they had with integrity, even when it was small. That's not condemnation, it's empowerment. It means you are not waiting for a miracle to start changing your financial life. You are already in a position to prepare for what comes next. Authority wakes that awareness up. This matters deeply right now because financial stress tends to shrink people's sense of self. They stop seeing themselves as capable. They stop asking good questions. They stop believing they can learn, adjust, or rebuild. Spiritual authority pushes back against that shrinkage. It reminds you that wisdom is available, guidance is accessible, and growth is possible even under pressure. It doesn't promise ease. It promises presence. And presence changes how weight is carried. So as we continue, understand this foundation clearly. What you're engaging with is not a shortcut. It's a return to order. It's a reminder that you are allowed to ask for help without shame, to seek wisdom without guilt, and to trust God without abandoning responsibility. Authority doesn't remove effort. It directs it. Authority doesn't eliminate uncertainty. It gives you footing inside it. And that's why not everyone is comfortable with this message. Because authority requires ownership. It requires honesty. It requires letting go of the comfort of victim language. Some people prefer panic because it excuses inaction. Some prefer despair because it lowers expectations. But authority calls you higher. It invites you to participate in your own restoration with humility and courage. As you stay with this, notice what's happening internally. Notice if resistance comes up. Notice if part of you wants to dismiss this as too serious or too slow. That awareness is important because the next step requires maturity. What we're moving toward is not emotional hype, but a shift in posture. And that shift is where real financial transformation begins. There's something I need to say carefully, but honestly, because this is the moment where many people quietly step away. Not everyone is ready for what this kind of alignment demands. And that's not an insult, it's a reality. When financial pressure is intense, some people want comfort, not correction. They want reassurance without responsibility. They want relief without adjustment. And this path does not work that way. This emergency psalm, and the posture behind it, is not for those who want to stay emotionally attached to chaos. It's not for those who secretly prefer to believe that everything is stacked against them, because that belief removes a burden of change. It's not for those who want someone else to carry their responsibility while they wait for circumstances to magically shift. This path requires honesty. It requires self-examination. It requires the willingness to admit, some of this pressure didn't just happen to me, some of it grew over time. And that admission is uncomfortable. That's why most people stay stuck. Not because they lack faith, but because they avoid ownership. They spiritualize avoidance and call it patience. They repeat hopeful phrases while refusing to look directly at their habits, their fears, their patterns. They pray for open doors while ignoring the discipline required to walk through them. And when nothing changes, they assume God is silent, when in reality, He's been waiting for alignment. So let me offer a gentle but firm wake-up call. This is not about blaming yourself. Blame paralyzes. Responsibility activates. There is a difference. Responsibility says, I can learn. Responsibility says, I can grow. Responsibility says, I can change how I respond, even if I can't change everything at once. If hearing that creates resistance in you, pause and notice it. Resistance often protects familiar pain, and familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar growth. The emergency psalm does not work as a passive ritual. It works as a mirror. It shows you where fear has been running your decisions. It shows you where avoidance has been disguised as spirituality. It shows you where shame has convinced you to stay small. And that's why some people will listen once and never return. Because looking honestly at your inner posture is harder than repeating comforting words. Here's the truth most people don't want to hear. Financial pressure exposes what already exists beneath the surface. It reveals how you handle stress, how you talk to yourself, how quickly you give up, how willing you are to learn, how open you are to correction. Pressure doesn't create character. It reveals it. And revelation is uncomfortable before it becomes empowering. This message is not for people who want to be told that none of this is their responsibility. It's also not for people who want to be shamed for past mistakes. It is for people who are ready to stand in the middle and say, I didn't get everything right, but I'm willing to get better. That willingness is rare. And that's why transformation is rare. December intensifies this tension. It brings deadlines that can't be ignored. It exposes gaps people have been avoiding all year. It highlights financial habits that were hidden by routine. And when that exposure happens, people respond in one of two ways. They either numb themselves or they wake up. Numbing looks like distraction, overspending, avoidance, or pretending everything is fine. Waking up looks like humility, focus, restraint, and courage. The emergency psalm is designed for the second response. I'm not saying this to scare you away. I'm saying it to clarify the path. If you're looking for a spiritual experience that lets you stay exactly the same while everything around you changes, this will frustrate you. But if you are ready to let your inner world become more disciplined, more honest, more stable, then this will strengthen you. And strength is what sustains abundance. Another uncomfortable truth. Some people benefit emotionally from staying stuck. It gives them an identity. It gives them a story. It gives them sympathy. Growth threatens that identity. Responsibility threatens that story. Authority threatens the comfort of helplessness. That's why stepping into a posture of command, even a quiet one, feels dangerous at first, because you can no longer say, there was nothing I could do. Authority asks, what can I do now wisely with what I have? This is why the next phase matters so much. You cannot move forward while secretly holding on to the identity of someone powerless. You cannot pray with authority while still speaking to yourself like a failure. You cannot ask for provision while resenting the discipline that protects it. These contradictions drain energy. They create inner friction. And that friction keeps people tired even when opportunities appear. So take a breath and ask yourself, honestly, am I willing to let go of the comfort of victim language? Am I willing to stop rehearsing the same fears? Am I willing to listen for instruction, not just reassurance? Am I willing to accept that growth might require discomfort before it brings relief? These questions are not accusations. They are invitations. If this message is stirring something inside you, that's a sign you're still here for a reason. It means you're not just consuming content. You're engaging with truth, and truth always presses before it frees. It unsettles before it stabilizes. It challenges before it empowers. Stay present. Don't rush past this moment. The shift we're moving toward requires this pause, this honesty, this willingness. Because the next step is not about asking for more. It's about understanding the difference between speaking from need and speaking from authority. And without this internal adjustment, that difference will never make sense. Up to this point, we've been dealing with posture, honesty, and responsibility. Now we need to slow down and clarify something that changes everything, because many people confuse these two ideas and never understand why their financial prayers feel inconsistent. There's a fundamental difference between asking and declaring, between speaking from need and speaking from alignment. This is not about volume, tone, or emotion. It is about position. Most people pray about money from a place of anxiety. Even when their words sound spiritual, the posture underneath is fear. Fear of running out, fear of being behind, fear of embarrassment, fear of repeating the same month again. That kind of prayer is not wrong, but it is incomplete. It is a cry, not a command. And cries are meant to be heard, but commands are meant to be carried out. Scripture makes room for both, but it never confuses them. When someone prays from panic, they are reacting. When someone speaks from alignment, they are responding. Reaction is driven by circumstances. Response is driven by truth. Reaction says, "This is happening to me." Response says, "This is how I will stand in the middle of what's happening." That distinction may sound subtle, but it determines whether your inner world stays chaotic or becomes ordered. A prayer asks for intervention. A decree assumes relationship. That doesn't mean arrogance. It means trust. It means understanding who you are speaking to and who you are in that relationship. You don't command God. You align with what He has already declared. When you speak from alignment, you are not trying to convince heaven to care. You are agreeing with what heaven has already made available. Wisdom, provision, guidance, discipline, favor, peace. This is where many people get uncomfortable because they associate authority with pride. But biblical authority is the opposite of ego. It is submission that produces confidence. It is humility that produces clarity. It is obedience that produces stability. Authority is not saying, "I deserve everything." Authority is saying, "I trust enough to obey, adjust, and stand firm." Think about how this applies to finances. When someone says, "God, please help me," but continues to avoid clarity, avoid learning, avoid boundaries, and avoid discipline, the words and the posture are misaligned. The prayer becomes emotional release, not transformation. But when someone says, "God, order my steps, correct my thinking, guide my decisions, and help me act wisely," that prayer creates movement. Not always immediate results, but steady progress. A decree in the spiritual sense is not shouting outcomes into existence. It is stating truth over your inner posture and committing to live in alignment with it. It sounds like this: "I will not let fear decide for me. I will not speak hopelessness over my future. I will act with integrity even when pressure is high. I will seek wisdom before I seek relief." These statements shape behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. This is why understanding the difference between asking and declaring is essential before moving forward. If you try to declare without alignment, it becomes noise. If you only ask without ownership, it becomes dependency. But when asking and declaring work together, something stabilizes inside you. You stop swinging between hope and despair. You become consistent. And consistency is what builds financial resilience. The Psalms model this beautifully. They often begin with distress, confusion, or fear, but they do not end there. They move toward remembrance, trust, and clarity. The psalmist speaks to his own soul. He doesn't just talk to God, he talks to himself. He commands his inner world to remember truth. That is authority. He is not denying pain. He is refusing to let pain define reality. This is especially important when dealing with money, because money pressure is loud. It hijacks attention. It narrows thinking. It makes everything feel urgent, even things that are not. Without authority, urgency turns into panic. With authority, urgency turns into focus. Focus allows you to see options you couldn't see before. Focus helps you distinguish between what feels relieving and what is actually helpful. Another important distinction: asking often looks backward, while declaring looks forward. Asking focuses on what is missing. Declaring focuses on what is being built. Asking says, I don't have. Declaring says, I am becoming. That shift alone changes how a person handles opportunities, setbacks, and timing. People who stay stuck often stay focused on what they lack. People who grow stay focused on what they are forming. This does not mean ignoring reality. It means interpreting reality correctly. You can acknowledge a tight situation without letting it dictate your identity. You can admit need without surrendering authority. You can ask for help without collapsing into helplessness. That balance is maturity. And maturity is what sustains prosperity over time. So when we speak about an emergency psalm, understand this clearly. The emergency is not just external. It is internal. It is the urgency to restore order inside before chaos outside makes decisions for you. It is the urgency to stop letting fear be the loudest voice in the room. It is the urgency to shift from reacting to leading your own inner life. If you skip this understanding, the next parts will feel confusing or even uncomfortable, because what comes next is not about louder words but firmer footing, not about emotional release, but internal alignment, not about asking repeatedly, but standing consistently. Let this sink in before we move forward. Authority is not something you perform. It is something you practice. And practice always begins with awareness, honesty, and choice. At this stage, something subtle but decisive needs to happen. Up to now, we've talked about posture, authority, and alignment, but none of that becomes real until identity shifts. This is where many people stall, because identity is comfortable even when it's painful. People learn how to survive inside an identity shaped by lack, pressure, and apology. They learn how to explain themselves, justify themselves, and minimize themselves. And over time, that survival identity starts to feel normal, familiar, safe, even when it's exhausting. For a long time, many people relate to money from a posture of permission-seeking. They ask, they wait, they hope, they apologize internally for needing help. They speak as if abundance must be begged for, as if stability is something reserved for others who deserve it more. This is the posture of a petitioner, not a sinner, not a bad person, just someone who has learned to associate provision with anxiety instead of responsibility. And that posture shapes every decision, every hesitation, every delay. The shift that needs to happen now is not external, it's internal. It's the moment where you stop seeing yourself as someone pleading for relief and start seeing yourself as someone entrusted with stewardship. That shift does not make you aggressive. It makes you grounded. It doesn't inflate your ego. It stabilizes your spine. You stop shrinking when pressure shows up. You stop defaulting to fear-based language. You stop handing over your confidence to circumstances. A commander is not someone who controls everything. A commander is someone who takes responsibility for direction. They assess, they decide, they adjust. They don't deny reality, but they don't surrender leadership to chaos either. When you step into this identity, you don't say, nothing ever works for me. You say, I will learn what works. You don't say, I'm terrible with money. You say, I am learning to manage wisely. You don't say, I'll never catch up. You say, I will take the next right step. This identity shift matters because identity always moves faster than circumstances. Before finances change, language changes. Before outcomes change, posture changes. Before stability shows up externally, authority forms internally. People often wait for proof before they change how they see themselves. But Scripture shows the opposite pattern. People step into identity first, and then resources follow the alignment that identity creates. Think about it this way. When you see yourself as a petitioner, you react. You wait. You hesitate. You overthink. You avoid clarity because clarity feels threatening. But when you see yourself as a steward, you engage, you plan, you learn, you ask better questions. You tolerate discomfort because you understand it leads somewhere. The external actions may look similar at first, but the internal energy is completely different. This is where the language of command becomes important. Not command over God, and not command over people, but command over your inner world. You begin to tell your fear where it belongs. You begin to tell shame that it no longer has authority. You begin to tell anxiety that it does not get to narrate your future. This is not pretending those emotions don't exist. It's refusing to let them drive. A commander does not wait until they feel confident to act. They act responsibly, and confidence grows as clarity follows. This is especially true with money. Waiting until fear disappears before making wise decisions often means waiting forever. Authority says, I will move forward carefully, even while fear is present. That alone breaks cycles that have lasted years. This identity shift also changes how you interpret delays. A petitioner sees delay as rejection. A commander sees delay as instruction. A petitioner internalizes every closed door as proof of unworthiness. A commander asks, what is this teaching me? That difference determines whether a person grows bitter or wiser under pressure, and wisdom compounds over time. Another important part of this shift is dignity. Financial stress often strips people of dignity internally, even if no one else knows. They feel embarrassed for needing help, ashamed for past choices, inferior when comparing themselves to others. Stepping into a commander identity restores dignity, not because everything is fixed, but because responsibility replaces self-contempt. You stop punishing yourself emotionally for being human. This is not about denying help. Commanders receive help strategically. They seek counsel. They accept guidance. They don't isolate, but they also don't abdicate responsibility. They partner with God instead of outsourcing their agency. They pray and then they act. They listen and then they apply. They trust and then they steward. December is a powerful moment for this identity shift because it exposes patterns. Endings reveal truths beginnings often hide. If you've been living in reaction mode, December magnifies it. If you've been avoiding structure, December confronts it. That exposure can either crush you or clarify you. The difference lies in identity. Petitioners feel crushed. Commanders feel sobered, then focused. So let this sink in slowly. You are not here to beg your way into provision. You are here to grow into stewardship. You are not powerless. You are responsible. You are not late forever. You are learning timing. You are not cursed. You are being refined. That language matters because it shapes how you show up tomorrow, not just how you feel today. As this identity settles, you may notice discomfort. That's normal. Growth always disrupts familiar narratives. Old excuses lose their grip. Old coping strategies feel empty. But in that discomfort, something steadier forms. A quieter confidence. A willingness to face numbers without panic. A readiness to make decisions without drama. That is authority taking root. And once identity shifts, proof begins to appear in subtle ways. Better conversations, clearer thinking, more restraint, better questions, more patience. These are not small things. They are the foundation of sustainable abundance. Because prosperity that lasts is built on who you become, not just what you receive. Once identity begins to shift, credibility must be anchored, not hype, not emotion, not personal opinion, but something older, steadier, and tested. This is where scripture functions not as decoration, but as structure. Biblical authority does not exist to impress. It exists to stabilize. When financial pressure is intense, people don't need dramatic language. They need something solid enough to stand on when emotions fluctuate. That's what these anchors provide. Throughout Scripture, provision is consistently tied to inheritance, stewardship, and authority under God, not randomness. When the Bible speaks about inheritance, it is not referring only to material wealth, but to position. Inheritance establishes legitimacy. It answers a question, do I belong here? Before resources move, identity is clarified. That pattern matters because many people struggle financially while secretly believing they don't qualify for stability, wisdom, or peace. They may not say it out loud, but it operates underneath their choices. One of the most grounding declarations in Scripture states that those who belong to God are heirs, not outsiders. An heir does not beg for access. An heir learns responsibility. This matters deeply in financial life. When you see yourself as an heir, you stop treating provision like luck and start treating it like stewardship. You stop chasing and start preparing. You stop comparing and start building. That shift reduces panic and increases discernment. Another recurring biblical anchor is the idea that hidden resources exist, but they are revealed through alignment, not force. Scripture speaks of treasures revealed at the right time, not to inflate ego, but to fulfill purpose. That means provision is often connected to readiness. Readiness of character, readiness of discipline, readiness of perception. Financial help does not always arrive as money first. Sometimes it arrives as insight, restraint, or a door you previously overlooked. Authority helps you recognize those forms of provision instead of dismissing them. There is also a clear biblical emphasis on authority over fear. Scripture repeatedly reminds people that fear distorts judgment, not because fear is sinful, but because it narrows vision. When fear dominates, people mismanage resources, avoid clarity, or act impulsively. Authority restores calm. Calm restores discernment. Discernment improves decisions. This chain is not mystical, it's practical, and Scripture addresses it repeatedly because it understands human behavior deeply. Another anchor is the concept of delegated authority. Scripture teaches that people are given responsibility within limits. That means you are not responsible for everything, but you are responsible for something. This truth protects you from both pride and helplessness. You are not expected to control outcomes, but you are expected to act wisely within your reach. Financial peace grows when people stop trying to control what they can't and start managing what they can. Provision in Scripture is rarely disconnected from obedience. Obedience here does not mean blind compliance. It means alignment with wisdom, choosing restraint when impulse is loud, choosing patience when anxiety demands speed, choosing honesty when shortcuts are tempting. These are not glamorous acts, but they protect the flow of provision over time. Scripture treats them as acts of faith because they trust long-term outcomes over short-term relief. These anchors matter because they remove fantasy from faith. They replace magical thinking with grounded trust. They teach that abundance is not chaos. It is order, not excess, but sufficiency with margin, not pressure, but peace paired with responsibility. That kind of prosperity lasts because it is supported by character. Now, this is the moment for a second intentional act of engagement, not as a ritual, not as superstition, but as a marker of agreement. Agreement with truth changes how the mind organizes itself. It sharpens focus. It reduces internal conflict. It signals readiness. If you are willing to agree with this posture of stewardship, authority, and responsibility, write this phrase in the comments. I take responsibility with faith. Nothing dramatic, nothing emotional, just clear alignment. This is not about proving anything to anyone else. It's about hearing yourself commit. Language matters because it trains attention. Attention shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. This simple statement reinforces the identity shift already forming. It signals that you're no longer waiting passively, but participating actively. As you make that commitment, notice how it feels. Some people feel relief. Others feel resistance. Both are informative. Relief means alignment is settling. Resistance means an old identity is loosening its grip. Neither is wrong. Both indicate movement. Scripture does not promise that authority eliminates challenge. It promises that authority clarifies response. It doesn't guarantee immediate relief, but it guarantees access to wisdom. It doesn't remove effort, but it directs it. And direction is what turns pressure into progress. Stay with this tension. Don't rush past it. What we are building here is not emotional momentum, but structural stability. And structure takes time to settle. What comes next depends on this foundation being solid, because the next movement will intensify imagery, meaning, and engagement. Without these anchors, that intensity would feel overwhelming. With them, it becomes empowering. As this foundation settles, the story needs to move from explanation into experience. Because humans don't change only by understanding ideas. They change when they recognize themselves inside a narrative. So imagine this not as someone else's story, but as a pattern that repeats itself quietly in many lives, often without being named. There was a season when pressure closed in from every side. Not dramatic, not sudden, just constant. The kind of pressure that doesn't explode, but slowly tightens. Each decision felt heavier than it should. Each bill carried emotional weight beyond its number. Nights were restless, not because of noise, but because the mind wouldn't stop replaying questions with no immediate answers. Nothing was technically falling apart, yet nothing felt secure either. That middle space is where many people live for years, calling it normal. At first, the response was effort alone. More hours, more strain, more trying to outrun the anxiety. But effort without alignment only amplifies exhaustion. The harder the push, the louder the inner noise became. Even moments of progress didn't bring peace, because fear was always waiting to ask, what if this doesn't last? That question drains joy faster than failure itself. The turning point didn't come through sudden money or dramatic external change. It came through a quiet internal decision to stop letting fear lead, not to deny the pressure, but to stop treating it as the authority. That decision didn't remove uncertainty, but it changed posture. Instead of waking up bracing for damage, there was a choice to wake up attentive, listening, willing to adjust. That's when the language shifted, not outwardly at first, but internally. The constant apology for existing under pressure softened. The shame around needing stability loosened. The inner dialogue stopped saying, I hope nothing goes wrong today, and started saying, I will act wisely with whatever the day brings. That shift sounds small, but it changes how you notice opportunities, how you respond to obstacles, and how you conserve energy. The story unfolds slowly here, not in leaps. A conversation that once felt intimidating became clearer because fear wasn't running it. A decision that used to be delayed out of anxiety was made calmly, without drama. Spending became more intentional, not restrictive, but conscious. The urge to escape discomfort through impulse faded, replaced by patience that didn't feel forced. None of this felt supernatural in the moment. It felt grounded, real. Then something subtle happened. Doors didn't fling open, but cracks appeared. Not luck, but access. A piece of information that arrived at the right time. A connection that made sense only in hindsight. An option that had always been there, but couldn't be seen clearly through anxiety. These moments weren't fireworks. They were confirmations. Proof that alignment sharpens perception. This is how spiritual authority often moves. Quietly, practically, through clarity rather than spectacle. It strengthens a person so they can carry what comes next, because provision without capacity becomes pressure, and pressure without identity collapses. As momentum built, the internal posture continued to evolve. There was no longer a sense of being chased by deadlines, but an awareness of pacing. No longer fixation on catching up, but focus on building forward. That alone relieved enormous mental weight. When the mind stops racing, the body follows. Sleep improves. Decisions improve. Conversations improve. And those improvements compound. The story does not remove challenge. There are still tight moments, still unexpected expenses, still uncertainty. But the response was different. Instead of spiraling, there was assessment. Instead of avoidance, there was engagement. Instead of shame, there was learning. Each response reinforced identity. Each choice strengthened authority. Each step made the next one easier. This is the escalation most people miss. They expect transformation to feel like intensity, but often it feels like steadiness. They expect power to feel loud, but often it feels quiet and grounded. They expect progress to erase fear, but instead it teaches fear where it belongs. December plays a unique role in this story because it tests what has been built. It compresses pressure and exposes weak spots. For someone still operating from panic, December feels suffocating. For someone stepping into authority, December becomes clarifying. Not easy, but focused. Not carefree, but intentional. In the story, December did not bring instant relief. It brought confirmation. The confirmation that alignment works under pressure, that discipline creates margin, that clarity reduces waste, that faith expressed through responsibility changes outcomes over time, and that confirmation built confidence, not arrogance, but trust in the process. This is the point where many people realize something important. The real miracle wasn't external improvement, but the internal stability that made improvement sustainable. The pressure that once defined the person no longer owned them. It informed decisions, but it did not control identity. This escalation matters because it prepares for what comes next. Authority that survives pressure becomes leadership. Leadership attracts opportunity. Opportunity requires stewardship, and stewardship multiplies provision, not overnight, not magically, but reliably. As the story unfolds, notice how it mirrors your own patterns. Where fear has been loud, where avoidance has delayed clarity, where responsibility has felt heavy but necessary. You're not behind for noticing this now. You're on time for responding differently. Because the next phase is not about imagining victory. It's about stepping into a moment where authority, alignment, and trust converge. And that convergence is where declaration stops being theoretical and becomes lived reality. Everything you walked through so far has been preparation for this moment. Not because something dramatic must happen externally, but because something decisive must happen internally. Clarity has been forming. Identity has been stabilizing. Authority has been taking shape quietly. Now all that converges into a single, focused movement. This is not an emotional peak. It is a point of decision. A true climax is not noise. It is alignment under pressure. It is a moment when fear no longer dictates direction, even though uncertainty still exists. It is the moment when you stop negotiating with panic and start standing on what you know to be true, not because circumstances are easy, but because your posture is settled. In this moment, the emergency psalm stops being an idea and becomes a lens. You are no longer listening for relief alone. You are listening for instruction. You are no longer asking to escape discomfort. You are asking to be guided through it with clarity and integrity. That shift matters because it determines how you handle what comes next. The intensity here is not created by volume or repetition. It comes from stillness, from attention, from the decision to stop scattering your focus across fear-based scenarios and bring it back to what you can actually steward. This is where authority becomes practical, where faith becomes operational, where alignment becomes visible through choices. In this moment, you acknowledge reality without dramatizing it. You recognize pressure without surrendering leadership. You accept responsibility without self-punishment. You allow the weight of your situation to inform your decisions, not crush them. That is the posture Scripture consistently honors. Not denial, not despair, direction. This is also where internal language locks into place. Not affirmations for comfort, but declarations of posture. Quiet, firm statements that shape behavior. Statements like, I will not let fear rush my decisions. I will not sabotage progress for temporary relief. I will act with integrity even when pressure is high. I will stay present instead of avoiding what needs attention. These are not emotional statements. They are structural ones. They create boundaries around your behavior. As these declarations settle, something important happens. The mental noise reduces. Not because problems disappear, but because your mind stops rehearsing worst-case scenarios as if they're inevitable. That mental space allows discernment to return. Discernment allows you to notice details you were missing before. Details that matter financially. Timing, patterns, opportunities, warnings, boundaries. This is where the psalm functions as a stabilizer. It recenters your attention on what is enduring rather than what is urgent. It reminds you that provision has always been tied to trust and obedience, not panic and performance. It grounds you in a timeline larger than this month without dismissing the needs of this month. That balance is rare and it is powerful. The climax is not about commanding outcomes. It is about committing to posture. Outcomes are influenced by posture, not forced by words. When posture shifts, behavior shifts. When behavior shifts, patterns shift. When patterns shift, results follow in time. This is not dramatic, but it is reliable. You may notice resistance here. A part of you may still want certainty before commitment. That's understandable. But certainty is rarely given before responsibility is accepted. Scripture consistently shows that steps are revealed as people move, not before. Waiting for full clarity before acting often becomes another form of delay. Authority accepts limited information and still chooses wisely. So in this moment, you choose steadiness over urgency. You choose discipline over impulse. You choose humility over self-criticism. You choose to listen instead of react. That choice may not feel like victory yet, but it is a turning point that makes victory possible. This is also where emotion settles into resolve. Not excitement, but calm determination. Not hype, but confidence rooted in alignment. You stop measuring your worth by your current balance. You stop interpreting delay as rejection. You stop equating struggle with failure. And those shifts protect you from decisions that undermine long-term stability. Nothing external needs to happen right now for this moment to be real. The reality is internal. It is a decision to remain aligned even when pressure tests you. It is a refusal to abandon wisdom for speed. It is a commitment to keep your inner world ordered so your outer world can follow. This is a peak of focus, the moment where distraction loses its grip, where fear is acknowledged but not obeyed, where faith expresses itself through restraint, clarity, and responsibility. This is where the emergency psalm does its deepest work, not by changing circumstances instantly, but by changing how you carry them. From this point forward, the movement shifts, not upward into more intensity, but forward into application. What has been built internally now begins to express itself externally, step by step. The pressure does not disappear, but it no longer dominates. And that is the difference between surviving and leading your own life. What follows a moment of decision is not silence, and it is not instant celebration. It is movement, quiet, deliberate movement. This is where the language of battle, victory, and possession becomes internal rather than dramatic. The battle is no longer against circumstances alone. It is against old reactions. The victory is not loud, it is stable. And possession is not fantasy. It is responsibility claimed in real time. The battle phase begins when pressure tries to pull you back into familiar patterns. This is important to understand, because many people assume that once alignment is reached, resistance disappears. It doesn't. Resistance changes form. It becomes subtler. It shows up as temptation to rush, as impatience with process, as irritation with boundaries, as a quiet voice that says, "Just do what you used to do. It's easier." That voice is not evil. It is habit. And habit is powerful because it feels known. This is where the real battle happens. Not in dramatic confrontations, but in daily choices. Choosing not to avoid what needs attention. Choosing not to spend to escape discomfort. Choosing not to speak hopelessness when numbers feel tight. Choosing not to abandon discipline when emotions fluctuate. These choices don't feel heroic. They feel ordinary, but they are decisive. Victory begins to take shape when these choices stack. Not all at once, but gradually. You notice that anxiety doesn't hijack your entire day anymore. It still appears, but it doesn't dominate. You notice that you can look at your situation without flinching. You notice that conversations about money feel less charged. You notice that your decisions feel cleaner, less reactive. That is victory. Not because everything is solved, but because you are no longer fragmented. Victory also shows up as restraint. The ability to say no without resentment. The ability to wait without panic. The ability to move slowly without feeling left behind. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs of authority. Authority is proven by what you refuse as much as by what you pursue. As this victory stabilizes, possession begins. Possession is not about claiming something you don't have. It is about taking full responsibility for what you do have. Your time, your attention, your energy, your decisions, your habits. When you possess these fully, external resources stop leaking through emotional gaps. Waste decreases. Focus increases. Margin begins to form, sometimes invisibly at first. Possession also means accepting that growth requires maintenance. It is easy to feel motivated in moments of clarity. It is harder to stay consistent when motivation fades. But possession is not sustained by emotion. It is sustained by structure, simple systems, clear boundaries, honest assessments, regular reflection. These are the quiet tools that turn alignment into stability. There may still be moments when fear flares up, a bill arrives, a plan changes, an expectation isn't met. The difference now is response. Instead of spiraling, you assess. Instead of catastrophizing, you adjust. Instead of assuming failure, you look for instruction. That shift alone preserves energy that used to be wasted on panic, energy that can now be used to build. Possession also brings patience, not passive waiting, but active endurance. You stop demanding immediate proof that everything is working. You understand that sustainable progress often looks uneventful before it looks impressive. This patience protects you from abandoning good practices just because they haven't produced dramatic results yet. As the cycle of battle and victory continues internally, something external begins to reflect it. Opportunities become easier to recognize, not because more opportunities suddenly exist, but because your perception is clearer. Conversations feel more purposeful. Decisions feel more grounded. You are less reactive to noise and more responsive to substance. That responsiveness is what allows provision to be handled well when it appears. Possession also changes how you interpret success. You stop chasing symbols and start valuing stability. You stop measuring progress only by outcomes and start measuring it by consistency. You recognize that peace is not the absence of challenge, but the presence of order. That realization keeps you from sabotaging progress in moments of boredom or impatience. This phase is not glamorous, but it is powerful. It is where people either solidify their growth or drift back into old cycles. The difference is vigilance, not fear-based vigilance, but awareness. The awareness that authority must be practiced, not assumed. The awareness that identity must be reinforced through action. The awareness that possession requires care. As you move through this phase, remember, nothing is wasted. Even setbacks become information. Even delays become refinement. Even resistance becomes training. You are not being tested to fail. You are being strengthened to carry what comes next without collapsing under it. The battle is not endless. The victory is not fragile. And possession is not temporary when it is rooted in responsibility. What you are building now is not just relief from pressure, but capacity for growth. And capacity is what allows abundance to become a blessing rather than a burden. Stay steady here. Let the rhythm settle. This is where many people rush ahead and lose ground. But those who remain grounded here find that when the next door opens, they are ready to walk through it without losing themselves. What comes now is not an ending, but a rhythm. Transformation that lasts is never sustained by a single moment of clarity. It is sustained by return to alignment, return to posture, return to responsibility. That is why the final movement is not about intensity, but about continuity. What you have stepped into needs repetition. Not because it fades quickly, but because repetition turns insight into habit and habit into stability. For the next 3 days, you are not being asked to do something dramatic. You are being invited to return. Return to this message. Return to this posture. Return to the calm authority you are building. Not to relive emotion, but to reinforce structure. Each return trains your attention. Each return reminds your nervous system that panic is no longer in charge. Each return strengthens the identity you are forming until it feels natural instead of intentional. Day 1 is about awareness. You listen and notice where your mind tries to rush ahead or spiral backward. You notice how your body responds to pressure. You notice your language, especially the quiet phrases you repeat to yourself about money, timing, and worth. Awareness is not judgment. It is information. And information gives you options. Day 2 is about correction. You listen again, not to feel something new, but to interrupt old patterns. When fear tries to narrate your day, you recognize it sooner. When impatience tries to push you into impulsive choices, you pause. When shame tries to minimize you, you refuse to agree. Correction is not force. It is redirection. Small adjustments compound quickly when they are consistent. Day 3 is about reinforcement. By now, the posture feels more familiar. The urgency feels quieter. The focus feels sharper. You are not waiting for proof. You are practicing alignment. This is where authority settles into muscle memory. Not loud confidence, but quiet steadiness. The kind that shows up in how you speak, how you plan, how you decide, and how you wait. Returning for 3 days is not a ritual. It is training. Just like physical strength is built through repetition, inner authority is built through return. Each time you listen, you reinforce the same internal message. I am not ruled by panic. I am not defined by lack. I am responsible, guided, and learning. That message reshapes your behavior over time, and behavior reshapes outcomes. As you move through these days, pay attention to small shifts. Better sleep, clearer thinking, fewer reactive decisions, more patience in conversation, less urgency in spending. These are not coincidences. They are signs that your internal environment is becoming more ordered, and order is what allows provision to flow without chaos. This loop also protects you from the common mistake of abandoning good posture too early. Many people feel a moment of clarity, then immediately return to old habits because life continues to apply pressure. The return interrupts that cycle. It reminds you that authority is not a feeling you chase, but a position you maintain. Now, as you continue this process, there's an optional next step for those who want structure and guidance beyond this moment. If you feel led, you can join the Financial Breakthrough 7 Days campaign through the link in the first pinned comment. It was created to help you identify and release internal blocks that interfere with financial flow through guided prayer, reflection, and simple daily actions that strengthen alignment and confidence. This is not about asking for money. It is about preparing your mindset, your heart, and your habits to recognize opportunities, manage resources wisely, and grow in trust. If that resonates with where you are, the invitation is there. For now, your focus remains simple. Return for 3 days. Listen with intention. Practice alignment. Let authority deepen quietly. What you are building does not need to be rushed. Stability grows strongest when it is allowed to take root. You are not starting over. You are continuing forward with more clarity than before.